So he's an Emmy and Gemini award-winning journalist, and his career spans over 25 years. And his passion is giving a voice to those who need it most. He always goes the extra kilometer on the Fifth Estate. Welcome to my guest, Mark Kelley. How are you?
I'm doing great. The sun is out. I'm feeling inspired today. So this is a wonderful timing, synchronicity to be talking with you. And thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. So you did a series called Seven, where you actually lived in someone's shoes, literally for 7 days. So you were out on the street, you did some teaching at a troubled school. What impact did that have on your idea of empathy and charity, and how did kindness play a role in it?
Um, well, I got to, first thing, great way to start this conversation. I didn't
Thank
know
you.
this is how we're going to start this conversation, but I can say, actually my career is like 35 years.
Oh,
And, um, and what you were talking about there, the 7 series I did probably had more impact on me than anything else I've done in my
mhm,
career. And for those who hadn't seen it, it is the idea of saying, you know, as journalists, we show up to do a story, we interview a few people, and then we're gone in an hour or two. And I always said, well, how do what do we really know about the story or the situation or the experience if we're only there for an hour or two?
mhm,
What if I were to spend 7 days living as part of that story? So that was the general idea, to give us a better understanding. And then we would
mhm.
document those 7 days and the experiences that I would go through over those 7 days. Because when you're 7 days of this, everything's first and you're capturing it on camera. So it's an
Right.
interesting way to discover your own human experience and the experiences of others. So I was 7 days, you mentioned, as on the street. I grew up in Montreal. And years ago, I had an old friend of mine who was running the Old Brewery Mission, which is one of the oldest homeless shelters in Canada. And I called him up and I said, this may sound like a crazy idea. Can I move into the shelter for 7 days and learn more about homelessness? Because, you know, as a very privileged person, I only know about homelessness, as most of us do, from walking by people on the street. But what do I really know? Nothing. So that was the basis for my story, going out, meeting the people, understanding the
Mhm.
context, understanding the challenges, trying to get, as I did in this story, one person off the street. And for one of those days, you know, because some of the homeless people said, look, Mark, look at you. You don't look like a homeless guy. You will know, no, you'll never understand what it's like unless you're broken down like us. So one of those days, I actually had one of the CBC people put me with a beard and a wig and makeup and old clothes. And I went out there, and it wasn't to try to, you know, poke fun at the
Mm.
homeless people, but it was to say, how will people respond to me?
Right.
And, you know, I'm a guy on TV, and people see me on the street and they're like, hey, you're Mark Kelley, and wave to me. As I was dressed up as a homeless person, boom, everything changed. People would cross the street to avoid me. You know, people would not make eye contact with me. When I'd go around with a little hat, just trying to engage people who
Mhm.
would have nothing to do with me. And it was really
Wow.
incredible until one guy stopped. And it was a cold day in Montreal, and I was sitting in a snowbank, and this guy comes by to me. He says, get up. Let me take you to, he took me to a Burger King, and he bought me a burger. He didn't sit with me, he bought me a burger and a drink. He put it down and he walked away. And it didn't seem like an act of kindness, but it was inherently an act of kindness.
Mm.
And as I understood, and I spoke to people around the street, what got them through their days on many days was just that kindness.
Wow.
Maybe it was a cigarette. Maybe it was a loonie that somebody would toss.
Mm.
But more than that, it was the kindness behind the gesture. And that was the important thing for me, which I've always held on to when I see people who are on the street, is a little kindness costs us nothing. Yet you may have your issues to say, I don't want to give these people money. I don't want to
Right.
support their substance abuse, whatever. And that's your own moral dilemma. But I don't think there's an argument anybody can make as to why we wouldn't extend kindness to fellow Canadians who are in a situation.
Or at
So
least
that's one
acknowledge
thing.
them. Acknowledge them,
Acknowledge
not
it,
walk by and
and
make eye contact and make them feel like they are seen. I feel like
yeah,
that would be
and I was driving down Queen Street in our neighborhood here in Toronto the other day, and I see this younger guy talking to a guy on the street, homeless guy or a guy who was panhandling on the street. And I said, oh, that's nice that it's a younger kid talking to an older guy. And then as I got closer, I looked and it was one of my boys.
Oh,
And my heart just, and I didn't say anything. And then when he came home for dinner that day, I said, I noticed you on Queen Street, talking to that guy in front of Shoppers. He goes, oh yeah, that's Bill. I said, what do you mean that's Bill? Oh, I see him there often, so I'll chat with him. And I got to know his name and I got to know a little bit about him. I said, well, why did you do that? He said, well, why not? He's a guy and I'll talk with him a bit. And I find, I look at that. My wife does the same thing. Why not? What are we risking by opening our hearts, acknowledging him, as you say, and giving him a little time of our day? I think it's an important thing to do. And I think in the hustle bustle of our lives, especially living in a big, busy city as we do, kindness often gets pushed down on that sort of scale, things that we think we have to prioritize. We may think about it for our next door neighbor, but do we think about it for random people that we meet? I think all too often it gets forgotten. And I salute you for making kindness, reminding us about the importance of kindness.
thank you. Thank you for being kind. When I see that, and just to another compliment back at you. So your proximity to my schoolyard. My son has kicked the ball quite a handful of times into your backyard. So my husband's retrieved it, knocked on the door, and he said, God, he's a nice guy. He's like, I think he invited me for a beer. I was like, I don't think he did, but whatever. And it's so lovely that the person that you think you see on TV is the same person that you would meet on the street. I think that is very Canadian, and it's such a refreshing thing. So kudos to you. And your parenting, obviously, when your children see it, they emulate it. And I think that is really as easy as it gets. If you model the behavior, generally they follow, right?
And that's really, when I think of kindness, I think of my dad, and I should say my mom and my dad. But my mom was a bit more scrappy, and my dad, as I always love to say, and both my parents have passed away. But my dad would walk into a room of 10 strangers and leave that room with 10 friends, and that's the way he lived life. And I watched my dad, and I watched the way he responded to people, and the way people responded to him. And yeah, the modeling is important, and you learn a lot. And I like to think that my kids are going through the same thing. And I should add, for my wife, Angela, no kinder person you will meet. She's a yoga teacher. We walk down the boardwalk in this community, and I may be the one who's on television, but the one person who's being stopped every 5 minutes is Angela, was saying, oh my God, I love you. And thank you for all you've done, and your messages and your yoga and your inspiration. And I love seeing it, because it is sort of extending that circle of the good things that happen when you put good out into the universe. It just comes back to you so much. And I know both my wife and I, we really feed off that, of being active members in the community, and trying to give back in any way that we can.
Now, you also do some charity work for a couple of charities. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even look at it as charity work. Like
just what you do.
It's like volunteer work. My mother, growing up in Montreal, my mother decided after she was married that although she had a career after she was married, that she would devote her career to volunteering. And that's what she did for 50 or 60 years. My mother was a full-time, and I say full-time volunteer, like she left the house like she was going to a job every day, except didn't pay anything. And she did that for years. And when I became a journalist and started to travel through Quebec, people would say to me, oh my God, you're Mary Kelley's son? Oh, Mary, fantastic. You know what she's done for us in this community, and what she's done for us in that community, and so many efforts. And I didn't know. And then I started to learn that. And I realized how important it was through my dad as well. When my dad retired, there was a palliative care residence that was opening up in our neighborhood in Montreal where I grew up. And there was an instant pushback, because it was in a residential area, that the neighbors didn't want it there. And the minute my dad heard that there was this opposition to a palliative care residence, I mean, as we know, it's so fundamentally important, my dad got involved and would then begin a connection to this palliative care residence that changed our lives profoundly.
Wow.
mostly because it's after my dad helped get this place up and running. My older brother is a politician. He helped keep it running. And it would be the place where both my
Hmm.
mother and father would die and pass away in the same room.
Serendipitous. Wow.
Yeah, years apart. And that place had an impact on me that then I said, what can I do for you? And there began a relationship which exists to this day. I do a lot of fundraising for them. I give speeches. I'll go to people's homes. I'm on a sort of a board of advisors that they have there, and it is such a special place. Then the people who work there are so incredible. You talk about
Hmm.
kindness and the giving that they have provided. Um, just a couple of years ago, one of my good friends that I started my career with, he passed away at the residence in the same room that my parents had passed away in.
Wow.
I have two nieces who are working there, so I've made myself available for that residence in so many different ways, because they've given us, my family, and myself so much. I have always said to them, "What can I do for you?" And then they fill in the blank and they find ways to have me involved, and I'm very proud of that for what they've done. And and it's just reminded me the importance of always just asking people the fundamental question, how can I help?
And I think kindness begets kindness as well. So if you find someone isn't being kind and you're kind to them, it almost wakes them up, and it begets kindness. And you remember the basics. Hello, how are you? Like the because I think sometimes people are always in a different place and they're not thinking at the moment, at the present. So definitely begets kindness.
Yeah, it can be very disarming that you know the old cliche, kill them with kindness.
Right.
But actually, and as a journalist going out
Yeah.
to meet people, sometimes I do
Mhm.
show up and I'm met with resistance.
Right.
Uh, and then we start chatting and they'll say, oh, you're not such a bad guy after all. And then things happen from there. But you know, it's in the volunteering, the charity work is also saying, how can I make myself available? And I was thinking of this the other day. I like to jog in the mornings, and I was going for a run, and I ran by two spots in our neighborhood. One being a soccer field,
Mm.
and another being the lacrosse box. Both not
Yeah.
far from this from our neighborhood here in the beaches in Toronto. And I remembered when we moved here to Toronto 22 years ago, our oldest son was whatever he was, 3 or 4 years old at the time. And so I took him out and he had signed up for soccer. And we're standing around and we're waiting for the coach to show up. And we're waiting. And there's, you know, what, like 24-year-old kids and it's a little crazy. And then finally, you know, all the other teams start to play. And it's like, we don't have a coach. And then somebody says, well, does anyone want to volunteer to be coach?
Wow.
And I knew, like, you say that to me and I'm the sucker and I'm looking around and of course
Me.
I'm, I said, I'll coach today. And then
Right.
it must have happened for the coach that he got held up in traffic or, you know, work commitment or whatever. So the next week we show up and we're
No
standing
coach.
around. No. And the other parents are looking and saying, Mark, I think you're it.
You're
And
right.
I said, okay, all right. So here we go. And so there, I think it was a 12-week season that I'm
Right.
coaching. Parents are coming up and saying, that is like so nice of you. So what is your background in soccer? And I laugh. I said, I've never played soccer in my life. Like, well, how are you coaching? I said, you know, I've watched it on TV. I know a
Right.
little about
How
it.
hard can
But I
it
said,
be, right?
how hard can it be? I said, but the issue here isn't what do you know about soccer? It's like, what do you know about volunteering? Like, what do you know about sort of saying of putting your hand up and saying, okay, I'll do it.
Right.
And then the next year I enrolled that same son in to play beaches lacrosse. And we're at a meeting and they said, okay,
They
we are
say,
desperate. We have no
you.
coaches. We need a coach. Would somebody like to volunteer to be coach? And I'm like, oh, you guys know how to get me. I'm like, yeah, okay. So what do you know about lacrosse? Nothing. Never played it. Wasn't a big thing in Montreal growing up.
Yeah.
I haven't even teached it. So they
Right.
put me in a coaching clinic. And that was
16
12
years ago.
years. No, this was 12 years of consecutive years of coaching after that. I made a pact with Beaches Lacrosse. I said, as long as I have a son playing, I will coach. And I have
Perfect.
4 boys, and all 4 of them played lacrosse. So I had this 12-year career, and I would be working downtown, and then would have 6 o'clock games, like driving
Hustle.
like hell
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get here, to rally the kids, to get organized. But it was always so fulfilling, and getting to know the kids,
Right.
and just being part of their lives in a way. And people always say, it's thank you for giving up your time, thank you for
Mm.
giving so much. And I'm saying, giving, I'm getting, like, I'm not a selfless person here, I'm getting a whole lot out of this experience,
Right.
like, you do. And it's really rewarding, and it's fantastic. And that next year, when none of my boys played anymore, and I said, I'm sort of ready to pass the torch to
Right.
somebody else. People said to me, my wife was saying, "Oh my God, you're going to be so relieved you're not coaching anymore."
And you
And
missed
then
it.
when the lacrosse season came around, and I'm kind of like, so I end up walking down to the lacrosse box, and I'm standing there watching the kids play and seeing them having fun. But I felt, my time is
Right.
done. But I can't emphasize it enough. And for other people who may have been on the fence, don't hesitate,
Put your
volunteer,
hand up.
put your hand up.
Put
It's
your
a
hand up.
simple gesture, and you're in, and you can work your life around it. I Trust me, I have a super busy life, and I found ways to make time for it. And and the pandemic has made it harder, really, to do these things, but they're not lost on me. And I'll add one more thing that I think, why I think has been so important. Um, every year, at St. Aidan's Church here, again in our neighborhood, they on Christmas, they would have a Christmas lunch
Mm.
for people who are homeless or lonely. And one year I said, yeah, I'm going to go serve. I'll help in the kitchen. I'll serve. I'll do whatever I can. And I saw my boys sort of looking, well, but Dad, it's like Christmas Day. I said, of
Mm.
course, I know, that's the point. It's Christmas Day. So I'm going to go, but I'll be back in a couple of hours. You guys don't worry. And then I see them looking at each other, and then they're like, well, all right, well, we're going to come.
Nice.
And I think we've done it maybe six years in a row that we would do it. And my boys got, they'd recognize some of the people there, and they're, hey,
Mm.
we're back. And I watched them grow their own confidence and understanding of the importance of doing it. And my father, and I always choke up when I think of this, so I'll try not to again. My dad lived by this motto that he actually wrote down, and he had it on his dresser, and it said, "God, make me necessary to somebody today." And that's how he
Wow.
lived. And I saw that, and I remember we talked about that, and it stuck with me and sticks with me to this day.
That's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. And it just flips everything into a different perspective. So Mark, thank you
Yeah.
always for telling stories that are about people, and they're real people. And you never forget the humanity of the story. And I think that matters, that being kind matters. So thank you so much. And this is where entertainment and charity meet.